Hi, I'm Ed. This is Liam. We're going to do a video on using a vibratory tumbler. This is a Tumblers Ultra Vibe 18 pound tumbler. So it takes a lot of rocks to fill it up. I'm not going to claim to be an expert. Basically, I'm going to show you what I'm doing and how it's working for me. I'm going to be completely honest, this is, I think, the third batch I've made in this tumbler, but I've had some really good results so far. And when I first got into this, I started looking for videos, and I'm not seeing a whole lot. So I'm making one. I'm going to show you what I'm doing. I'll show you the results I get. Good or bad, I'll show you the results I get. And hopefully, if someone who really knows what they're doing with one of these things watches this, please give me a comment and tell me if I'm doing it right. I don't think I could be too wrong with the results I'm getting, but basically, you know, I'd be very happy to have some tips or to find out if I'm doing anything wrong. And if I am doing something wrong, I don't want to spread it. So basically, I want to make sure I got this right. First thing is, with a vibratory tumbler, you don't do step one. I'm going to assume that most people are fairly familiar with rotary tumblers. The first step is a 60-90 grit, and you don't do that in one of these. Okay, so basically, part of the reason I kind of wish I'd gotten a 10-pound vibratory. It takes me probably close to a month to get enough rocks through my my 12-pound rotary tumbler to get enough rocks to actually fill this. So basically, I'm doing step one in a rotary, and then I'll move over to this. Now the good news is, in the rotary, you're looking at step one. For me, I go 2 to 3 weeks. Step two, I might go 2 weeks. Step 3 and 4, I go 1 week each. So for me, I'm looking 6 weeks to do a batch from start to finish. Once we hit the vibratory, I'm going to do step 2 in 3 days. I'm going to do step 3 in 2 days, and I'm going to do step 4 in 2 days. So once I get to the point that I'm at right now, I'll have the whole batch done in a week. Now, that could vary by person because, okay, I tend to like the rocks to be pretty smooth when I get them done. Okay, and a vibratory tumbler is not going to do, it's not going to round the rocks like a rotary tumbler will. So basically, the rocks are going to keep their shape, and if you like that, then you don't need to spend nearly as long in the rotary as I do. Okay, I try to round them off, get rid of all the edges, try to get rid of all the holes or all the cracks or all that, and I like to get them really, really smooth when I get done. I'm going to show real quick, because here's the thing. Here's a couple of examples. This rock is from the last batch I did. I don't know if it's going to focus. Okay. It's got a hole in it. Okay, and it came out alright, but if that hole bothers you, then I would have needed to spend more time in the rotary. This one's got like a little, almost like a little crack right there. It's nothing big, but it's still shiny, it still looks nice, it's still pretty, but if that bothers you, then you've got to spend more time in the rotary to get ready. If there's any kind of imperfections on the rock, like with this one, okay, same thing, you got to either spend more time in the rotary, or this one you never would have gotten rid of all that. So basically, it just depends on how you're looking for your rocks to come out. Now, what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to fill this up 2/3 full. Then we've got to get it going, and this is a little more complicated than with the rotary tumbler. First of all, it uses less grit, and we're starting with step 2, so we're using the 122/20 grit. And I have right here, I've already pre-measured, I'm supposed to use 8 ounces of it. So I've pre-weighed it, I've got my 8 ounces of grit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the rocks into the tumbler, and then we're going to have to turn it on, and you have to add the grit and add water to get enough, get the slurry to the point that it will stick to the rocks and coat the rocks. Now the fun part is, if you get a little bit too much grit and not enough water, it will get too thick and it's going to stick all the rocks to the bottom and they won't tumble. Okay, and then it won't work. If you get too much water, it will wash the grits off the rocks and they won't tumble right and it won't work. And once you do get it started, once you get it going, the slurry will gradually thicken. So it's not like the rotary where I turn it on, I don't even look at it for 2 weeks. You got to check these. I try to check them in the morning and in the evening, and if I can, again in the afternoon, to make sure, because the slurry will thicken up with time, and you got to add a little bit more water, or you'll open it up and all your rocks are stuck to the bottom and they're not tumbling, and that's not going to work. So this is a little bit more, it requires a little bit more of your attention than the rotary tumbler does. But I'm going to tell you this, the results I've gotten, I've been extremely happy with. So at this point, I'm pretty much, all I'm doing with the rotary is step one. And then once I have enough rocks, I move on to the vibratory, and we go from there. Now, when I start doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the rocks in, and they're wet already. I kind of heard at one point that you should not let the rocks dry once you start tumbling them. So some of these have probably been wet for a month. Because what I'll do is I'll put a batch in my 12-pound rotary, and then I open it up when they're done, and I take out the ones I think are ready. The ones I don't, I leave them in. And so it's kind of like a running batch for over a month to get a good bit of rocks. Now I have more than I need right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to fill this up. We're going to keep the rocks wet. And I like that because when I start putting in the grit, if they're dry, it's just going to go straight to the bottom. And then when I add the water and turn it on, it probably will pick most of it up. But I think it works better if the rocks are wet, and then as I put them on, it sticks to them.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Sorry about that. We had a little interruption. We were working in our basement, and my wife pulled into the garage. That worked out anyway because I wanted to move it closer to where you could see the tumbler. So as I was saying, if the rocks are wet, when I add the grit, it'll stick better, and I don't end up with it all on the bottom, and I have it on the rocks, which is where I want it. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting the rocks into the tumbler. I have the rocks next to it in a little tote with water in it, so they are wet. And when I start adding water, I'm going to be using a spray bottle. I have it filled with distilled water because I do use a water softener because we have hard water here. And I don't know if it would affect things or not, but the water softener adds salt to the water, and I don't really want salt in my tumbler. I don't know if it would hurt or not, but I figure that's just not a good thing. I am going to say once we've got the rocks in, which I'm going to start working on that, and I turn this on, it's loud. Okay, so I'm probably not going to be able to talk, but what you're going to see is I'm going to turn the rocks on. I'm going to see if they move right, because that's the thing. When we get what I'm looking for, you'll be able to tell. But they should roll inside the barrel. Okay, they should roll, and if they do, that's great at the start. But what I'll do is I'll make sure they're wet, and then I'll start adding the grit. And as we get going, if they're not tumbling right, then I might have to add some ceramic media to help fill it up. I don't think I'm going to have to do that though, because I have a lot of rocks this time, so I should be able to get this. I think I should be able to get this going. All right. If you guys can see some of the rocks, I've got kind of a wide mixture of rocks this time. I've got some jasper in there. I've got some red tiger eye. I've got some rocks that I collected near where we live. This might be the biggest rock I have. You can also do bigger rocks in the vibratory than the rotary. What I've been told is you want a kind of a wide variety in size of your rocks. So I have some bigger rocks. I have some smaller rocks. Looks like they're staying fairly wet as is. That's one thing about this thing. It takes forever to load and unload. So there we go. I think I'm going to go ahead and do another little cut, and I'll come back once we've got the rocks loaded up. Alright, we're back again. It's really, for me, it's hard to kind of judge what 2/3 is. I would venture to guess that I've got to be fairly close, but we'll see when we start playing with this. Just to show you, this bowl actually can come clear off of here. So basically that's how you can load and unload it. And it goes on, and then we have a little piece that goes there to keep it in place. Okay, and then you want to tighten this nut down on it so that the bowl will stay in place and it won't leak through here. Okay, now I'm going to use a wrench to tighten this down, but I do want to say I am not really going to torque this real hard because I want to hold it snug in place, but I don't want to crush the top of my tumbling bowl. That'd be kind of expensive to replace, so I'm going to get it pretty snug. I want to give it a little test run and see what it does. Okay, it's kind of like I expected. They're not tumbling real well right now. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to work on, I might take some out. I don't know, I'm kind of leaning towards I have too much in there. I'll take a few out. Okay, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to start it up, and I'm going to add in a little ceramic media. See if maybe the spaces between is what's causing us some of the problem. So here we go. We'll throw in a little bit of ceramic media. Can't hurt. Okay, I'm just using the small ceramic media. I think I've got enough larger rocks. I don't need to use the larger. Alright, now when I start this up again, you're not going to be able to hear me, so I'm not going to be talking, but the idea is I'm going to start it up, try to get it tumbling, try to get a little bit of water on the rocks, and then start adding the grit. And what we should end up with is these rocks are going to look pretty much all gray when it's done. Alright, so here we go. All right, I think I think we're pretty good here. It's not going to be completely covered gray yet. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it run for about an hour, and then I'm going to come back down and check it because it really can't produce a slurry yet. I'm not sure if you can see this in the camera, but if you look, the rocks are coming up with grit on them. So the grit is sticking to the rocks. I've still got some more to add, so I'm going to add a little bit more. You notice I'm only using a squirt bottle. The first time I did this, I used tablespoons, and I put way too much water in. It's amazing how quick you can get too much water in. So I just used the squirt bottle. I'm trying to use as little as possible. I think once I get the rest of this grit in, we're going to be pretty good. And I'll show you how to put the lid on. And it does get quieter when you put the lid on. But then we'll let it run for about an hour, and then I'll come back down and check it. And at that point, I think we'll probably have what I was looking for, which is pretty much they'll be covered in the gray slurry. So let's give it a little more and get the rest of the grit in. Alright, I don't know if the camera, if the way the sound works, it'll really pick up the difference here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the lid back on, or put the lid on so you can hear the difference in sound with the lid on versus the lid off. It is pretty significant. Same deal, put on the little washer. You screw this down. I'm not going to tell you it's quiet. It's not. Okay, but this is our basement, and my kitchen is directly above us, and it's tolerable. So, and once again, we're not cranking this down real hard, just get it snug, and then when the lid's on, it sounds like this. Yep. Which I can probably make myself heard over this.
That's what you hear.
Alright, the idea so far has been to get the rocks tumbling. You can see they hesitate a little bit, but they get moving pretty good. Sometimes they work themselves out, and it is amazing to me that when I start, you can see when I'll add a little bit of water, it'll start moving a little better. It looks like the battery on my other light's going out. Okay, but they'll start moving pretty good, and right now, Right now it looks like they're moving pretty well. So I'm going to give it a little bit more water. Okay, and then I'm going to let this run for about an hour and I'll take another look at it. I'll come down and film that and add it on to the end of this video. Okay, I'm back. It's been about an hour since I started this up. And I didn't open this up, so you're going to see when I see what we're looking at after about an hour. Okay. I did notice, because I looked at the previous videos, my camera equalized the sound. So when I put the lid on, it sounded about the same as when the lid was off, but trust me, it's a lot louder with the lid off. With the lid on, it's not really too bad. Alright, looks like the rocks are not covered yet, but they're getting there. It's starting to, the sludge is starting to go. Let's see how they're moving. Alright, it looks to me like they're moving a little bit better. I like the way they're moving now. They're not sitting still. They don't seem to be getting hung up. I can see grit on them. Looks like I may need a little bit more water. They looked a little bit dry when I first opened it up. But at this point, what's going to happen is I'm going to let this run for 3 days. It's October 15th. It's a Monday. So probably Thursday, I'll have to open these up, clean them all off, and we'll move on to pre-polish. Let's take one more look at how they're rolling. Alright, I think they're moving pretty well now. I think they're ready to go. Be back in about 3 days, probably with a, it'll be a new video. Thanks for watching.